We're going to wrap up book 2 of Dallas Pimiento, and after this, the project is going to go on hiatus. I've got 2 more volumes after this. I just want to take a break, do something different. Alright, we'll begin with a piece called Enunciation of Motive. When the public's demand for an explanation became too great to ignore any longer, the mayor himself was sent out to appear on the Weevily Contumeral show to make what enunciation of motive he could. Mr. Wells Contumeral addressed himself to the mayor. "Thank you for joining us tonight." "You are welcome." Steve Wells did not believe in replying to a thank you with a thank you, even on a television program such as this, where such exchanges were the norm. "I relish the opportunity to set the record at rights concerning these matters which have been so much on the minds of the citizens of this city. And elsewhere, you must admit," Contumeral added. "Well, that may be true, Mr. Contumeral, but I'm not the mayor of any place except Tomatoville, and the burden of my duties lies with its people and no one else's." This retort went down well with many Tomatovillians watching the program. "Well then, let's get down to the matter at hand. Why has your administration seen fit to lend its resources to aiding this so-called Operation Mocker?" "I suppose the first thing to do in answering that question is to explain what Operation Mocker is and to correct some of the misconceptions that are circulating throughout the city regarding it." Contumeral made a noise of interest and brought his fingertips together. "In essence, Operation Mocker is," just as Mayor Wells began to make his statement, a disturbance off camera interrupted him. The sound of shouts and violent confrontation were heard. The average viewer at home had sat up for it in his easy chair and was calling out to the rest of his household to come witness the singular events unfolding on the TV just as gunfire erupted, and the set of the Weevily Contumeral show was charged by masked men, some of whom were still fighting off the mayor's bodyguards, but at least one of whom made it to the mayor's chair and put a bullet in his head. Contumeral, looking stunned but not particularly afraid, was spared out of the appreciation for his many years of broadcasting excellence. The vision of the different. Brant Borden, while wealthy enough not to have to work at some jive job for a living, yet lived quite modestly in a comfortable but not overly large apartment overlooking Tomatoville's celebrated bean gardens. He had no servants other than a woman who came in every other day and executed some light housekeeping. The day after the televised assassination of the mayor, Borden went to sleep early, having spent the day talking matters over with a couple of friends. As he lay in bed trying to sleep, a vision came to him. Later, he was not to be able to recall clearly which parts of this vision were dream and which were a definite visual presence in the darkened room, for he awoke some time before dawn with no memory of having gone to sleep. He was certain, however, that the initial part of the vision was no dream. His friends to whom he relayed the vision were skeptical, not of the veracity and accuracy of his account so much as his interpretation of the vision and its significance. "Since you cannot be sure if this yellow-robed man was in the dream part or the vision part, how can you ascribe such symbolic weight to his eating of the goat?" Hunlick tried to make sense of it all. "Hunlick, I don't think it matters all that much which phase of the experience the yellow-robed man was in," Borden argued. "I think it does," Rawling interposed. "I dreamed just the other day that I was back in high school again, only this time I pushed the teachers around. I hardly think that means anything." "But a vision, a genuine vision, that's something else," Hunlick affirmed. "Why?" Borden helped himself to another piece of toast. The three were gathered in Borden's dining room for breakfast. "Because it comes from the outside," Hunlick explained. "True," Rawling agreed, "but it still doesn't mean anything for anyone outside the visionary." "You're missing the point," Borden insisted. He spread butter on his toast. "The goat emerged from a well. Steve Wells." He bit into his toast, filling the awkward silence that followed his words with a crunch. Sharpened appetite of the collector. "And what are these?" Marcus asked his host. He and the latter man, Hanway of the House of Hanway, stood before Hanway's extensive collection of dried beans. Marcus was indicating a particular group of beans in their plexiglass-covered cubicle with the finger named for such use when he asked the above question. Oh, those are the real heart of the collection. Hanway became visibly excited. Those are favas from the lunar islands, which, as you may or may not know, are considered by many leading scientists to be the most likely home of the original fava bean, the wild favas mentioned in the compendium of Father Abraham. Fascinating, Marcus admitted. Indeed, he was fascinated. He wasn't just saying that. Are these, then, representatives of that ancient species? Genetic testing has not yet shown whether they are or not. But without serious doubt, they are the closest relatives of the wild favas still in existence, and thus the oldest known species of bean still being cultivated. The dinner gong sounded just as Marcus was about to ask if Hanway had gone to the lunar islands himself to obtain the beans. But come, my friend, Hanway smiled his patrician smile and took Marcus by the shoulder. Let us enjoy our dinner. We can talk more as we eat. He led his guest to a well-laid table by a large window overlooking the fields where the horses of Hanway were trained. The two men had not been seated more than a few seconds when steaming platters were put before them. I had almost expected to be served beans, Marcus said with a laugh. Hanway, however, frowned. I have found the available varieties poor of late. You should come back in the autumn. I expect to have something edible by then. But no, today we have corn, simple, plain, modern-day corn. Well, I like it, and I appreciate your hospitality, Marcus replied. I thank you. Marcus poured the meats a glass of wine. Tell me, he said. That girl Glinka, did she ever get over her loss? No, sad to say, Marcus tasted his wine. It was stunningly good. She has taken to drugs. Stupid girl. Hanway looked at the window. She should have taken up a hobby. His situation still rankled not only his own sense of propriety and fate, but his parents as well. Brant Borden needed something more than just a hobby to fulfill himself. Perhaps a job, Borden's father suggested. Oh, Harold, Brant Borden's mother looked up from the toy kangaroo she dandled on her lap. You know Brant. He's preternaturally disinclined to take orders, especially from some kind of boss. She tittered at the word. He could be his own boss. Harold Borden smiled at the idea. He could be self-employed. Yes, I believe that's the term. Felicia Borden shook her head as she looked down at the toy kangaroo. She spoke in a kind of baby talk to it and reached into its pouch and with two immaculately manicured fingers. Naughty girl, she accused, and the pills concealed within the pouch were brought to light. She downed them with the help of a glass of port at her elbow. I think I'll give Brant a call and tell him about my idea, the elder Borden continued to muse. So taken was he by his idea. He folded his newspaper into a thick, irregular mess and shoved it into the pocket on the side of his chair. Do you want anything while I'm up? He asked Felicia as he made his way to the telephone. No, she danced the kangaroo on her knee. I have everything I need right now. Brant Borden, cleaning his metal gardening implements with a solution of mineral spirits and linseed oil, was slightly irritated by the sound of the phone ringing. Washing his hands would be a 5-minute ordeal. He picked up the receiver with an oven mitten. Yes, Father, what's happening? Brant listened as his father conveyed his idea. That's a wonderful idea, he answered, but I'm afraid I've already got a job. Yes, I've signed on with the Municipal Intelligence Service. I'm going to be a spy. Isn't it amazing? He says he's already got a job. Harold covered the mouthpiece and told his wife, who nodded merrily. His strangest smile was reserved for the interviewer, who asked him about his time on the old First Impressions show. Frank Vinegar, the man sent by Rockabus magazine to interview the legendary television actor, wondered at that smile, included the description of it in his story, but returned to his pregnant wife with no clue as to what it meant other than Roosterlies, the old actor. One remarked that things were different then. Of course, the editors of Rockabus and the vast majority of its readership would be far more interested in Roosterly's lengthy reminiscence about the most famous show he was on, Atomic Weight. The strange smile and the refusal to say anything substantive about First Impressions haunted Vinegar, however, and he decided to research Roosterly and the old TV show he was on. Maybe I'll get a book out of it, he suggested after he had told his wife about his intentions. He always says that, Shelley, carrying their first child, told her friend Bobla. I wish he would write a book. We could use the money. She ran her hand over her obscenely distended abdomen. He has written the book, hasn't he? Bobla warmed her chin over the cup of coffee in her hands. Years ago, when we were first dating, but it never sold. He needs to turn his reporting into a collection of non-fiction pieces, or write an expose about rockabouts. They treat him like shit, you know. Shelley's eyes flashed as he said that last bit. Barbara could hear the old-fashioned typewriter. It was such a reassuring sound. She wished her husband did something like write on an old-fashioned typewriter. It would make her proud as well as reassured. But no, Marcus was a commodities broker and always would be. Frank Vinegar exited his room and sped through the lounge where his wife and her guests sat. I just got off the phone with George. They want me to interview Weevilly Contumeral. Hi, Bobla. He went into the kitchen for coffee. Shelley pursed her lips and nodded at her friend meaningfully. Charming little ornaments. It breaks my heart to have to leave. Buck Roosterly stood in the front hall of the house he had occupied for 40 years. I know, sir. I can imagine, Brent Borden attempted to say the right thing. Roosterly looked the younger man in the eye. What is your department's interest in my moving? He asked. We don't like the fact that an upstanding citizen and respected entertainer such as yourself is being forced to sell his house and leave town by secrets out of the past. Borden recited the speech he had been ordered to memorize. That's fine and dandy, Roosterly commented, but I'm not telling what I know to you either. My secrets and those I've been charged with keeping by others go with me to the grave. And to Corn City? Roosterly looked down at Borden's shoes and up at his carefully combed hair. Yes, I suppose you people know all about where I'm going. You probably already know about the First Impressions show, too. Well, you can figure it out for yourself. About Dan Willoughby. To Borden, the name meant nothing. He had been told to use it only if Roosterly appeared uncooperative. The old man, however, threw up his hands with a growl and stalked out to his waiting car. En route to Roosterly's new home, a modest bungalow in Corn City to the south, the moving truck was detoured by city agents who searched its contents for one specific box. This was confiscated, and the truck allowed to continue, its driver and crew being threatened and sworn to secrecy. Brant Borden was not present when the box was opened in a small room at Municipal Intelligence Service headquarters. Two stout old men went through the box together. What do we do with Borden? One asked his old colleague. Put him to work gathering dirt on his rich friends, the other answered. He reached into the box and withdrew a red ball made of glass, covered in silver filigree that spelled out the words, Light Entertainment. The discrete cluster. One cluster, all to itself among the array of similar clusters in the vacuum of supposedly infinite space, was named Turrentine, but the team of explorers at first tethered their moon canoe to one of the rocky coral-like projections that covered some of the outermost agglomerations of junk that formed the cluster. As Captain Solaby clambered across the ladder from the moon canoe to become the first man to set foot on Turrentine, he looked down and noted an unusually large concentration of multicolored plastic beach pails among the cluster's constituents. Lots of pails here, he commented over the walkie-talkie built to the high collar of his jacket. Mused Dr. Stalking, back on the moon canoe. That could account for the confusing spectrograph reading. He turned to Paulson, the missionary's son. Grayson's theory, you know, he said with a grin. Grayson's theory has never been proven. It's pure speculation. Paulson was testy. He kept his eyes on the captain's white-booted feet, moving even further away. You still can't accept it, can you, boy? Your God is dead! Dead! Stalking pulled a toothpick from out of the compartment in his wristband made for storing just such an implement and picked his gums contemptuously. Enough with that divisive talk, Solaby's voice came back to the anxious crew. Prepare to send across the first group. If all goes well, we may be camping out here on the surface tonight. That crazy Solaby's going to get somebody killed, Minch whispered to his pal Forret. That cluster could be crawling with fruit flies. Forret thought. You and I ought to volunteer to stay on board and guard the canoe. Did you just think of that? Minch asked. Did you just think that into my head? Did I? Forret wondered. So sorry, man. I didn't mean to be so rude. No, it's no problem. I just didn't know you could do that. I thought I told you. You mean you think you told me that you could tell me your thoughts? What?